Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Chris Leak, and I'm the chair of the City County Planning Board. I'm now called to order the April 8th, 2021 meeting, which will be conducted remotely. Due to the state of emergency, all planning board members are participating remotely. I will now ask our planning director, Aaron King, to call the roll.
Okay, George Bryan.
Present.
Melinda Dunnigan.
Here.
Jason Grubbs.
Here.
Clarence Lamb.
Here.
Chris Leak.
Here.
Bo McCray.
Here.
Gotcha. Brenda Smith.
Here.
And Jack Steelman.
Here.
All right.
Thank you so much. I'd like to recognize, I think, Councilmember Scipio, and also I see Councilmember Larson. Are there any other council members I've overlooked? All right, thank you for joining us today. When there is a vote, a roll call vote will be conducted. Each board member will be recognized and asked to clearly state their vote for the record. All guests participating in this remote meeting, either through Zoom or by phone, will remain muted until recognized by the board for comment. Today's meeting is being broadcast live on TV 13 and is also being live streamed on the city's website. The meeting will also be replayed on TV 13 tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. and Sunday at 4 p.m. Our first order of business today will be the consent agenda. These are items for which the petitioner is requesting withdrawal or continuance, or items for which staff has recommended approval and no one has signed up to speak in opposition. For our public hearings today, each side will have a total of 12 minutes. There is no rebuttal period. Once you have been recognized by the board, staff will unmute your microphone so that you can provide your comments. After the public hearing is closed and the board goes into work session, no one is permitted to speak unless the planning board asks them a question.
It's what I wear to church, Austin, like your church coat, blazer, suit coat.
The items under section B of our agenda will require final action by the elected body, either the city council or county commissioners. As such, votes taken today are recommendations which are considered by the city council or board of commissioners during its review of the requests. For special use district zoning requests, the petitioner must identify the intended use or uses of the site and give specific details on how the site will be developed. If you are addressing the board today, we will ask that before you begin your comments, please give us your name, address, and zip code for the record. Before we go into the official business, I would ask the board to indulge me. We have Mr. Tommy Hitz on the line, and Mr. Hitz was a faithful planning board member, and we want to recognize him as he exits. And we have a resolution, and I've asked Ms. Dunnigan to please read the resolution. After she reads the resolution, if any planning board member or staff person has anything to say, please feel free to do so. After that, Mr. Hitz, we will give you an opportunity, and then I will need to get a motion and a second from the planning board to bring the resolution into record. Ms. Dunnigan.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. This is a resolution honoring Tommy Hicks for his service as a member of the City County Planning Board. Whereas the City Council of the City of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and the Board of Commissioners of Forsyth County, North Carolina, appointed Tommy Hicks to serve on the City County Planning Board. And whereas Tommy Hicks served the citizens of Forsyth County and Winston-Salem as a member of the City County Planning Board from September 2013 to February 2021. And whereas he invested time and energy to thoughtfully understand and consider each item presented to the planning board for consideration during his tenure, and whereas his experience working in the local banking and financial services community has given him an interest in the impact of planning decisions on businesses, and whereas he has contributed insights concerning the need to promote economic vitality and development in disadvantaged areas of the community, and whereas as a lifelong resident of Forsyth County, Tommy Hicks has recommended approval of development, plans, and policies which improve the conditions of the county's residents. And whereas he consistently respected various points of view on matters being considered by the board, whether they were expressed by members of the public, staff, or fellow board members. Now therefore be it resolved that Tommy Hicks is recognized for his volunteer service to the community through his membership on the City County Planning Board. We extend sincere appreciation to him for that service and wish him health and happiness in his future endeavors. Be it further resolved, this resolution be made a part of the public record and a copy of this resolution be furnished to Tommy Hicks. Adopted this 8th day of April, 2021. And Tommy, I personally wanted to thank you for your service on the board. I have personally appreciated your easygoing nature and your respect for all points of view and your contributions to our deliberations on the board. So thank you and good luck in your future endeavors.
Well, it certainly has been an honor. Thank you so much, Melinda, and everyone on the board for allowing me to just participate with you these many years. I have enjoyed my service with the city and consider it an honor and a privilege to be a citizen of Forsyth County, and particularly that of Winston-Salem. So as I go on my way to other endeavors, my heart will still be with you here at the Planning Board.
Would anyone else like to say anything to Tommy?
Yeah, this is Clarence. Mr. Hicks, appreciate your service. You truly are a public servant in many ways, not just on the planning board, but I also appreciate the well-reasoned, but yet compassionate approach you took to making decisions. So thank you very much for your service.
Thank you, Clarence.
Tommy, this is George. Thank you so much for your perspective. And as I sort of shared part of the table with you there, I always enjoyed hearing your views on the different cases. Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Yeah, Tommy, I'll also offer my thanks from our end of the table. I'm gonna miss having you next to me, although for the last year they haven't even put our squares next to each other.
Absolutely. Hey, Jason, you may have all the cashews now.
I'm giving them all to Chris Murphy.
Hey, Tommy, this is Brenda from the other side of the table. Just wishing you the best as your future endeavors with what you're doing. You will be missed. And I like cashews too.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tommy, from growing up on Gerald Street together as kids to worshiping together and also serving together now on the planning board, playing tennis in the streets when we were kids, when you imagine we met. You know, it's amazing to see full circle the husband, the father, and the person you have become. I'm honored to serve with you and honored to call you my brother and my friend. So hopefully this resolution properly defined who you are and what you meant to this planning board and what you've meant to the city. Does anyone else have anything to say? If not, I need to ask for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to offer a comment.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, Tommy, on behalf of Planning and Development Services staff, I just want to thank you for your service to the board. It has been a pleasure getting to know you all these years, and I consider you a friend now, and I look catching up with you on the golf course sometime soon. Take care, my friend.
Thank you so much, Aaron, and thank you also to our chair, Mr. Chris Leak, who, as he said, we've gone back all the way to tothood and tennis in the street on an imaginary net to my playing on the actual tennis court and going on to North Carolina Central to play for them. Chris had some hand in that because Chris just hated to lose. He absolutely hated to lose at anything. And so part of my competitive nature was honed in the fact that I had to compete against Chris Leak when we were kids.
Yeah.
So, again, I appreciate everyone's sentiments, and I am so honored to have had the opportunity to serve in Forsyth County on Forsyth County's planning board. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Mr. Lamb?
I move that we adopt this resolution and spread these upon the minutes.
Motion by Mr. Lamb. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? If not, Mr. King, will you please call the roll?
George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Mo McCray,
Hit that thing.
I think that was a yes.
Hit that thing, but do as you've been told, I guess.
Got it. Brenda Smith,
Yes.
Jack Steelman. Jack, I think you're muted.
Yes. And
Okay.
thank you, Tommy.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you so much. That is unanimous. Mr. Hicks, you are free to leave or you may stay for the next 3 hours with us. And thank you again, Tommy.
Thank you all so very much. And I wish you well. And I'll be watching not from too far away.
All right.
Call me if you ever need me for anything. Thank you. I will
Thank
sign
you.
off at this point. Thank you all.
All right,
God
bye-bye.
bless you all.
Thank you all for letting me do that. Our first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the March 11th public hearing meeting. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, is there a motion?
Move approval from Clarence.
Motion by Mr. Lamb. Is there a second?
Second, Jason Grubbs.
Second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? Mr. King, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Mo McCray,
Yes.
there we go. Brenda Smith,
Yes.
Jack Steelman. Jack, I think you're on mute again.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm now going to recognize Mr. Desmond Corley for the consent agenda.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I am, as usual, going to share my screen, and you all please let me know if you are having trouble or whether you're seeing the presentation view or the actual presentation. Which view do you have?
You're good.
We have the
Right,
presentation.
wonderful. The first item on the consent agenda is B1, which is case W3461. This was continued from the March meeting. They did some redesigning of the site. This is a request to rezone from RS9 to RM18S, almost six acres on the north side of Stafford Village Boulevard across from Stafford Place Boulevard. It's a multifamily development proposed in the Peters Creek Activity Center, and it is proposed to be age restricted. This is the proposed site plan, and I put the elevations over on the right side of this slide. There are 84 units proposed here in one 3-story building. It's accessed directly across from Stafford Place Boulevard down here, which is not where it was before. That's why they had to continue the case from March, but this will be a signalized intersection for full access to this site. The developer will be required to install a left turn lane on eastbound Stafford Village Boulevard. They'll be required to install a slip lane on westbound Stafford Village Boulevard, and to complete any kind of road widening improvements and installation of sidewalk along the entire frontage of Stafford Village Boulevard. They are also showing access easement stubs with public access allowed to the east and west for future possible connections. This is consistent with the area plan, and staff recommends approval. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Corley, I had a question.
Yes.
In the north part of the site, I see you've recommended a buffer yard there against the single family homes. I was wondering if they were planning on retaining any trees, if they were assuming there were trees there to retain. It looked like from the satellite view that there was a lot of trees there.
I don't know. I'm not seeing a note on the plan as you asked that question, whether they have any intention to retain existing vegetation. They do have some areas shown for grading. But if they do propose to retain existing vegetation, that will be allowed to count toward the buffer yard requirements. They could also supplement that existing vegetation if it's deemed to be
Work here for the
field,
Bottle of Bowman on Old Flat Rock Road.
that would be allowed to count toward the requirement for the type 3 buffer yard.
Okay,
Does
so
that answer your question?
you don't really know if they're going to retain trees, but they do have a buffer yard requirement there.
Right. It looks like some areas along that property boundary, they're not showing any kind of activity.
Right.
So there may be trees that are retained, but they haven't shown any kind of notation or anything on the site plan.
Okay, and then the other question had to do with the area that goes from the gazebo up to Stratford Village Boulevard, and wondered if there was some kind of a walkway or sidewalk to get up to the street.
There is. It looks like there's a sidewalk that goes, if you can follow my mouse, from here on around the curve down to Stratford Village Boulevard. It's a little hard to see, but it's there.
Okay. All right, and getting back to trees, they don't have any tree save requirement on this site, on this proposed, it's about 6 acres.
They do. It's not on the snippet of the site plan that I've included on this slide, but yes, there is a tree save area requirement.
Okay, so they are in compliance with that.
Yes.
All right, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Hey, Dustin, this is Mo. I know it says it's senior, but is it age restricted at 55 or 65? Do you know?
It's 55.
Okay, and I know that it's not required to have a community building, but because it's 55, to me, it would seem that just having one gazebo as a community amenity is somewhat limited here.
They are showing, and the applicant is here to speak specifically to it, but they are also showing some common areas inside the building. I don't know if those are intended to be amenities for the residents, but that's usually how these developments are built.
Yeah. May I speak here?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. Yes, thank you for the question, the comment. My name is George Tullis. I'm with the developer NVAH Partners. We will have community space in the building. One of the amenities within the common areas offered in the building will be a large community space that'll have a kit, not a full commercial kitchen, but it'll have a residential kitchen in it, and they'll be able to have events, seminars, meetings, resident events, things like that.
Okay, great.
Mr. Tullis, can we get your address for the record?
You sure can. 7425 Avalon Boulevard, Alpharetta, Georgia, 30009.
Thank you.
In addition to that, Ms. McCray, we'll have other amenities such as fitness center, business center, reading nooks, kind of a reading library share space kind of. And then of course the walking trail around the property and the opportunity to use sidewalks that we'll provide as well for access.
Great. I just want 55 is an active senior. And so I just really think that it's important to have those amenities as part of the site. So thanks for that clarification. I appreciate it.
Sure thing. Yep.
Are there any further questions? All right, so motion.
I'm sorry, I was muted. I did have a quick question.
All right, Ms. Smith.
Not necessarily specific to this, but to our zoning. How is the designation as senior enforced as far as zoning?
From our perspective, yeah.
Okay, I didn't know where I didn't think there was anything specific in the rules.
Yeah, in other words, that, even with life care community, I'm sorry, this is Chris, even with life care community and those kind of things, we don't get into age restrictions. That's kind of a marketing thing. So, that's something beyond our control, and it's something that's beyond zoning control.
Right. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
All right. If no other question, Mr. King, do we have anyone here to speak on this matter?
Mr. Chairman, we have 5 folks in support, no one in opposition.
All right, thank you all for coming out. I'm going to close the public hearing with that. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion by Mr. Lamb. Is there a second?
Second. Jason Grubbs.
Second by Mr. Bryan. Any further discussion? Mr. King, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Mo McCray,
Yes.
Brenda Smith,
Yes.
Jack Stillman.
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence again. I move that the planning board recommend approval of W 3461.
Motion by Mr. Lamb,
Second.
second by Mr. Bryan. Any further discussion? Mr. King, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Mo McCray,
Yes.
Brenda Smith,
Yes.
Jack Stillman.
Yes.
Okay, 8-0.
All right, the next item on the consent agenda is B2. It's case W 3460. This is a request to rezone from MUS to GBS on 3/4 of an acre at the southeastern corner of Fleetwood Circle and Firedale Drive. This will be a motor vehicle repair development proposed in the Robin Hood Village Activity Center between two developments that have received approval in the past 2 years. Here I've highlighted the main building or the main development on this parcel. It's a long non-bay garage with similar building materials and architectural style to the surrounding development. There are also conditions proposed that would limit signage, freestanding signage, to a single sign with a maximum height of 6 feet. And it will only allow storage of materials in indoor spaces. I've also included the elevations or the proposed elevations for this building in the bottom right-hand corner of this slide. It is consistent with the area plan. Staff recommends approval of this request.
Are there any questions for Mr. Corley?
Yes, please.
Mr. Stillman?
Yes, thank you. As to the restriction against outdoor storage of equipment and et cetera, does that also include a restriction against outdoor overnight and weekend storage of automobiles being serviced? Or will they also be required to be stored inside?
The UDO does allow for some outdoor storage of vehicles being serviced. There is a limit to the number of vehicles that can be stored before it becomes a storage yard, which has its own sort of zoning requirements for screening and whatnot. But that condition is not proposed to otherwise limit the number of vehicles that can be stored outside.
Last part of that lost me. I'm sorry, Desmond.
The condition that's proposed doesn't propose to further or otherwise limit more than the UDO already does the vehicles that can be stored outside of a building.
Thank you.
Mr. Corley, can you point out to me on the slightly larger plan where the what is it, a gas substation is?
On the, I can go back. It's down here to the south on the other side of Vienna Lane.
No, it's so this would be updated now because I believe they have a bunch of equipment in there.
Right.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Mr. Corley. I don't see any other questions for you.
Mr. Leak, I did have a question.
Yes, all right, Ms. Dunnigan.
Yeah, for Mr. Corley, the area plan recommends, if you could show that larger picture that you showed for Mr. Bryan, to the south and the east, right next to that substation. I think the recommendation is for low density residential, attached residential. The orange color that shows up on the area plan map. would that recommendation still be viable should this petition be granted?
I don't see any reason why that wouldn't be viable. I was flipping through the book to make sure I'm on the same page as you. I think that's actually,
I believe it's moderate.
yeah, I think it's,
Moderate density?
yes. So that's kind of intended to be a transition area between, you know, the commercial areas or the high intensity uses and the lower density, single family detached neighborhoods that are around this area. So yes, is the short answer to your question. I think that would, or we think that would still be a viable option. I think we've even seen a few sketches come in, or one sketch come in for somebody proposing to do that type of development there.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could ask one more very general question, please, which is during our neighborhood outreach efforts, do we ever consider the value of reaching out, not only, especially in a commercial area like this, to the building owners, but also the tenant businesses that occupy so much of this space?
I can't speak for the petitioners. Our letters always go to property owners. And I guess it would be incumbent upon the property owners to share that information with their tenants. I don't know, or I can't recall whether these petitioners reached out to tenants in this commercial area, but I don't think that's it's certainly not required by the UDO.
I understand, and I don't want to hold up this hearing forward. Maybe that's something we as a board can discuss at a later time.
And Jack, I'll just mention that's a question that's come up before. And so if you think about our strategy, so we've got multiple layers of notification and outreach. Certainly staff doesn't have any record of tenants. We have property owners. So we, of course, as Desmond mentioned, send those letters to the property owners.
Sure.
Also include the requirement that the applicant do some form of neighborhood outreach. And we purposely left that broad so that on individual cases, applicants can use their judgment and they can submit it back to you guys. And staff is not the arbiter of what passes the test or what doesn't. That's really for the planning board and the elected officials to look at that and say, this looks sufficient or no, it doesn't, and then give direction there. The third thing that really helps for the tenants is we put that sign up that's clear as day for anybody who's a tenant who may be coming in and out of the area, that they drive by it, they see it, they've got notification that something's going on there. So, we've got multiple different layers to try to get the word out and encourage participation and make folks aware of what's going on.
All right, thank you.
Any additional questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Corley. Mr. King, do we have anyone here to speak on this matter?
Mr. Chair, you've got 3 folks signed up in support, no one in opposition.
All right, thank you all for coming out in support. Seeing no one in opposition, I'm going to close the public hearing. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion by Mr. Lamb.
Second.
Second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? Mr. King, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan?
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan?
Yes.
Jason Grubbs?
Yes.
Clarence Lamb?
Yes.
Chris Leak?
Yes.
Mo McCray?
Yes.
Brenda Smith?
Yes.
Jack Steelman?
Yes.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence again. I move that the planning board recommend approval of W 3460.
Thank you. Motion by Mr. Lamb. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? Mr. King, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan?
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan?
Yes.
Jason Grubbs?
Yes.
Clarence Lamb?
Yes.
Chris Leak?
Yes.
Mo McCray?
Yes.
Brenda Smith?
Yes.
Jack Steelman?
Yes.
Okay, it's 8-0.
All All right, we will move on to the next item on the consent agenda, which is B4, zoning case W3465. This is just an annexation conversion. This property highlighted in yellow here was recently annexed into the city limits. And so we have a statutory obligation to change the zoning jurisdiction within a certain period of time. There really isn't a whole lot to discuss here. It will change from the county's zoning jurisdiction to the city's zoning jurisdiction. So staff recommends approval.
Are there any questions or comments? Mr. King, do we have anyone here to speak on this issue?
We do not.
All right, then I'm going to close the public hearing. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chair, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion by Mr. Lamb.
Second, Mr. Bryan.
I'm sorry, who seconded that?
Mr. Bryan.
Okay, second by Mr. Bryan. Any further discussion? Mr. King, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Mo McCray,
Yeah.
Brenda Smith,
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence again. I move that the planning board recommend approval of W3465.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? Mr. King, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Mo McCray,
Yeah.
Brenda Smith,
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
Okay, 8-0.
Mr. Chair, and I'll defer to Aaron here if I'm wrong, but I think this is going to be the last item on the consent agenda because we have opposition for item B5. And the other items are, excuse me, the other items, staff recommended denial. Do we have somebody to speak in opposition for B5?
We do, Desmond, you're correct. So that should bring us back to item B3 on your agenda. That's zoning case W3464. And Gary Roberts should be making that presentation. I believe Amy Crum is going to be getting that slideshow pulled up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This case was continued from your last meeting in March, and you may remember that we looked at a similar case on this property. It was scheduled for your January meeting, but that was withdrawn prior to that meeting in December. Petitioner is Donald A. Joyce, Revocable Trust, Michael A. Joyce, and Rachel Joyce Macy. The site is 3.22 acres located on the southwest corner of Union Cross Road and Sedge Garden Road. And it is a special use rezoning with a site plan from LB Limited Business and RS9 to GBS General Business, a special use 2-phase. And that is the list of the uses there. Proposed convenience store, food and drug store, restaurant with and without drive-through, offices and services A. This is Legacy's growth management plan. It's located in the yellow suburban neighborhoods, growth management area 3. Legacy also does have specific comments for development proposals within activity centers that I'll mention shortly. This is a zoning map showing the subject property there in yellow. Right there on the corner of Sedge Garden and Union Cross Road is a very small gas station that is no longer occupied. That's zoned LB. There are a couple of single family homes located on the property there. It's about 3 1/4 acres in size. That area is zoned RS9. It's a budding RS9 zoning to the west. Then across Sedge Garden Road, you have a shopping center within the Kernersville jurisdiction. Neighborhood business zoning classification there, a small grocery store with some out parcels, and then some LB zoning across Union Cross Road, RS20 zoning, and then a daycare directly to the south which is zoned RM8S. So about 20% of the site is currently zoned LB and about 80% is zoned residential. This is a good image here showing the development patterns surrounding the area. Is the development on the property that I mentioned just earlier. The shopping center across the street, you can see those 3 out parcels there, including a convenience store, a pharmacy. Generally are pulled up closer to the road, and I will mention that earlier or in just a moment. That's again consistent with the activity center that it's located within, with most of the parking to the side or rear. A couple of images taken on site. This is on Sedge Garden Road looking southeast from that shopping center I just mentioned into the subject property. You can see the small red roof of the convenience store or the former gas station that was there. This property will have full access at this intersection here, the driveway location. They will have a left in and right in, right out. Next image, please. This is across Sedge Garden Road, the out parcels that I mentioned earlier. This is on Sedge Garden, this is Union Cross Road looking north, so the side is to the left. You can see there is a small median there in the center that divides Union Cross Road. So the access onto Union Cross Road would be a right in, right out. This is the area plan for the subject property. It's the Southeast Suburban Area Plan adopted in 2016. So the yellow obviously is low density single family residential. Red would be commercial. Tan would be moderate density attached housing there, or low density. So the subject property is recommended for commercial, but it is within the Union Cross Sedge Garden Activity Center. So this is a kind of a small, compact commercial node. The area plan specifically recommends that buildings be pulled up to this intersection just as much or more than the use of the property is building placement. As you know, that really has a tremendous impact on pedestrian activity, where the building's dispositioned on the site, with parking located to the side or rear can greatly facilitate pedestrian interaction. And there's a lot of residential development around this, as you can see. Next image. So this is a site plan. It's a 2-phase request. As I mentioned, there's a out parcel there that you can see on the southern portion of the site, kind of divided by the driveway there on the Union Cross Road. A 5,200 square foot convenience store with the fueling canopy there. That's the long linear area. I think it's about 16 fueling stations, so it's a fairly intense development. Would generate a tremendous amount of traffic. There is capacity now on these 2 roads. It's not typically a use that we would see, however, within an activity center where compact mixed-use development in a walkable pattern is specifically recommended in Legacy as well. The access there on the left on the Sedge Garden Road, that would be opposite of the shopping center access, and stormwater management there right on the corner in the upper right there at the intersection. Months ago, staff did share a conceptual drawing with the petitioner showing how that this site could be developed even with this use in a little bit more pedestrian oriented fashion. That concept was shared with the planning director, Jeff Hatling, for Kernersville. And he did also support that design. The next image shows a little bit more of a elaborate drawing, but a similar concept for a convenience store at a major intersection there, basically flipping it, putting the fueling canopy in the interior, spacing the driveway access locations as far as possible to the edges of the site, and putting the building there, an attractive building right on the corner. So this is a very prominent corner, very visible corner, and that will really define the development pattern in this area. for years to come. Next image. So in summary, the request would make an auto-oriented use the focus of a prominent intersection within an activity center where really pedestrian uses are recommended. It's not consistent with the recommendations of Legacy, as I mentioned earlier, about building placement, and the Southeast Suburban Area Plan regarding building placement within activity centers. And the proposed use generates a substantial amount of vehicular traffic, actually thousands of vehicles with the 16 fueling stations. So therefore, staff's recommendation is for denial. Site plan does meet EDA requirements, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Roberts?
Let me ask Mr. Roberts. Mr. Roberts, did Kernersville share any other plans they have in that area for making that activity center more attractive as well?
No, they did not.
All right. Mr. King, is there anyone here to speak on this matter?
Mr. Chairman, we've got 4 folks who are signed up in support. So if you're ready to begin the public hearing, I'm glad to call the first speaker.
I am. As a reminder, there are 12 minutes for each side. So, all right, it's on you. Thank you, Mr. King.
The first speaker we've got on the list is Andy Priolo. So Andy, if you're with us, please go ahead and feel free to unmute yourself, provide your name and address for the record, and begin your remarks.
Yes, my name is Andy Priolo. I'm with Circle K. I develop convenience stores. Address 1110 Citus Court, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27606. And thank you for your time this afternoon. Just wanted to make a couple quick comments. I realize that staff has recommended denial based on the fact that our building is flipped. And just speaking through experience, I've been through many rezoning applications, and one of the things that always comes up is traffic toward or closer to the neighborhood. And by flipping the building like staff is recommending, it's our concern that creates more traffic to the rear of the site, which is again closer to the neighborhood. So that's one concern I would like to express. A second one is safety, and we see this a lot, and I can't give you any specific data, but I can tell you through our operations that when the activity is blocked by the building and the versus activity being in front where there's traffic and so forth, it tends to put more loitering, because you can't see people that are gathered, on the opposite side of the building if you're traffic going by the site. And as a 24-hour location, that's very important to us because obviously we want safety for both our customers and our employees. So anyway, with that, I'll defer to Pete with Bowman Consulting.
Okay, I think Peter Doster, if you're with us, go ahead and unmute yourself, provide your name and address for the record, and begin your remarks.
All right, good evening. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. My name is Peter Doster. Like Andy said, I am with Bowman Consulting, the civil engineer representing Circle K on this project. Address is 4350 Main Street, Suite 219, Harrisburg, North Carolina. And I did want to talk a little bit about what Andy was alluding to with our layout and why we are proposing this layout. I worked in the Carolinas for quite a bit with C-stores, and one of the bigger differences between a gas station C-store and like what we have across the street is the flow of traffic. When someone is going to a coffee shop or a shopping center, that's a destination for them. And so they kind of know where they're going. They kind of know where the parking is and things like that. When it comes to convenience stores and gas stations, those are things that a car might turn into at the last minute. And the reason they're going to do that, obviously, is to get gas and be on their way. So it's not a destination. And what's important is safety. So safety in and out of the site. I've seen it too many times where a car won't notice it's a gas station to the last minute. In this case, not seeing a canopy, which we all know that a canopy, second to the monument sign, is how you denote what a gas station is. So that's one thing that I would like to point out. I want to make the difference between a convenience store on a corner versus a shopping center, understanding that it is all within the pedestrian district. The other thing that that Andy pointed out is the lighting. We are surrounded by residential, and the canopy illumination within standards still puts off a good amount of light, and having that more towards to the road where the lighting already occurs just benefits the people surrounding us. The other point I would like to make is the angled layout that Gary presented before. Unfortunately, does not work for us on this site. The economics require us to have 8 MPDs, eight gas pumps, and by trying to angle it, we have too skinny of a site, so that would not work. And as you can see, we're proposing our underground stormwater in the low point of the site. So the only other way would be flipping where the building is and the canopy is today. And like Andy said, what that does is it blocks a lot of the viewing into our site. I want to point out that we are looking to provide a good amount of landscaping buffer beyond the 10 feet that is required to provide that pedestrian feel. Like, we want to do that in any means possible in this layout. So to promote pedestrians and walkability and things of that nature. So those are a couple of things I just wanted to say. Safety. It is a brand. There isn't too many gas station convenience stores that you can't see their canopy or some sort of signage that says, hey, if you need gas, here's a corner, pull in here, instead of, kind of slamming on the brakes or coming up to it last minute. The last thing I'll point out is I know we met with Annette on site to describe this layout, and I think it was, in favorable, our conversations just with this particular location, creating the left turn on Sedge Garden, making it accessible. We would have to adjust our approaches, I think, if we did flip the building and the canopy. And so understanding that it is in that pedestrian overlay district, we were just hoping that our particular location, our use, would be looked at a little differently than a shopping center. And I think, don't want to burn out all the time, but I think that is all I have right now.
Mr. Chairman, we've got 2 more speakers. Katie Kleibel is probably the next person signed up. So Katie, if you'd like to speak, feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself, give your name and address for the record, and begin your remarks.
Mr. King, how much time do we have left?
There are 5 minutes and 37 seconds.
Thank you.
Katie, if you're with us and you can hear me and you'd like to speak, go ahead and unmute yourself and name and address and begin your remarks.
Hi, Aaron. I don't think Katie has anything at this time. Yep.
The only other person signed up to speak is Andrea Gonzalez. If Andrea, are you there if you'd like to speak?
And I don't think Andrea has anything as well. She was just here to join in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Those are the only folks that we have signed up to speak on this case.
All right.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question to one of the presenters?
Yes.
Mr. Doster, these community activity or neighborhood activity centers are very important for cohesion, walkability, and things like that. Otherwise, it's just people are just going along a highway and they keep going. I'm not convinced in your presentations of yourself and the others about the lack of visibility of this canopy because I think it can be seen from both of the other approaches. But I'm also understand where you're coming from with your proposal. What can you do in this proposal to make this site more walkable, more pleasant, and less of a highway gas station type presentation? Because we need the cohesiveness in our activity centers. So what can you do that would enhance this?
Well, Mr. Bryan, thank you for your comment, and yes, I can talk to that. And we've been in these situations before, and like I mentioned, my answer to that would be to increase the visibility and the aesthetics from the pedestrian walkway. I have at times increased the look of the canopy with bricked columns to give it more of a building feel from the site, so it's not just pillars and fascia that you're looking at. I would say the buffer, the look of the buffer, the landscape buffer, what we could do to the sidewalk, benches and things that would promote a more of a bike path feel rather than a sidewalk. We have done that before, and I'm willing to do that here. So kind of to I guess my answer is we could dress things up so that the aesthetics are more appealing. Like you mentioned, it is very important to attract pedestrians and have them wanting to walk in this area. And I totally agree, and I totally I support that. So that's what I would say. I would say we would make things more aesthetically pleasing to anyone walking along Sedge Garden or Union Cross.
Can there be more plantings of larger shrubs or trees?
Yes, we can. Within the means of our grading and with the distance that we have between the sidewalk and our curb line. Yes, we can.
They have shown on their site plan, George, a 10-foot type 1 buffer yard along the 2 street frontages where they're only required to do a 10-foot street yard. So that would include those evergreen plantings. I think it's 8 per 100 feet. So that's on the site plan now.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I got a question for Gary.
Yes.
Gary, was there no more input from Kerners or from Jeff other than, yeah, we agree with your layout? Would they give any other comments or?
Well, he did mention that they had gone an extra mile across the street with trees, canopy trees within that shopping center. You can, if you're able to see the aerial there, you can see that. So I think he would probably like to see some of that replicated canopy trees within our jurisdiction as well. That's about all I remember, Clarence.
Okay, and then but you guys clearly as staff, as planning board staff, you clearly you talked about you emphasized the pedestrian overlay. I mean, you all talked about that clearly with the petitioner.
Oh yes, they've been aware of our concern about the particularly of the building location, but probably also the use for months.
Okay. Clarence, I'll just add, this is Aaron, I'll just add, if I can share my screen. Gary's right, we've talked about this at length, and I think they know our position. This is not a surprise to them. I do want to add to some of the comments that were made just for some perspective as we talk about this. If you can see my screen here, hopefully everybody can. This is a Google image. This is over just down the road from here, over on Highway 68, over in High Point, and you can see this is a quality art right here with a canopy pushed back into the site. Right across the street from it is a sheets with a canopy pushed back into the site.
Right.
Hopefully, can you guys see that I switched over to a different location? Can you guys see that as well?
Yes.
So this is in our own community. This is Somerset Drive and Stratford Road. This is a sheets with a canopy oriented to the site. And probably most recently, we spent a lot of time working with sheets at Meadowlark and Country Club to have the building pulled up to the corner. They actually did some nice articulation along this wall to kind of dress it up and to push that canopy into the site. I would contend there's plenty enough room on this site to do the same thing. And
How
that's
about
kind of
how about relocation of the stormwater device? Is the topo out there such that that's impossible?
I'm no engineer, but certainly from driving by that site looks pretty flat or reasonably flat. I mean, again, I'm not the site engineer, but it looks relatively flat.
Yeah.
So Mr. King, when these conversations were had with the petitioner, what was the feedback you received?
I will defer to Mr. Roberts and Mr. Kohler. They were the staff people most directly communicating with the applicant.
All right.
From what I recall, it's pretty similar to what they shared with you today as far as their reasons for not wanting to pull the building up to the corner.
Okay.
If I may, I want to make sure I understand the traffic flow here, because it does impact the pedestrian activity there. So I'm particularly concerned about a scenario where I'm traveling on Interstate 40, which is going to be, I guess, to the southwest of this location. And I exit Interstate 40. There's a lot of stuff over to the further to the southwest, I guess, between there and Glen High School, heading out Union Cross Road. But let's say I turn left and come back through the diverted Diamond interchange towards Kernersville, and I want to stop at the Circle K. I believe I'm going to have to then make a left onto Sedge Garden Road and then a left into the convenience store to be able to get in, because I don't think I can make a U-turn right there to head back and make a right turn. Is that accurate?
I personally can't say definitively if you're going to be able to make a U-turn there northbound on Union Cross. I don't know.
But Gary, the median is in place on Union Cross through that section, correct?
Yes, so you would not be able to take a left into the site off of Union Cross. That's correct. U-turns, I'm not sure about.
But that's my best bet, other than a left turn on Sedge Garden and a left turn in, right? Correct. I'm sorry, didn't mean to confuse.
Yes. And again, Clarence, again, it looks like you'd have better stacking if the entrances were, further away from the intersection rather than as close to the intersection as there's going to be.
Yes, that's another advantage to flipping it. And where they've got the out parcel there, really, that's where the driveway could be moved even further south, because southbound traffic on Union Cross Road, if they get a green light and they go through the Sedge Garden intersection and they're not planning on turning into this site, they could be going 40, 50 miles per hour, and then someone in front of them wants to turn right and go into this site. So as far away from the intersection as the driveway could be moved, the better. And flipping the building facilitates that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? All right, seeing I'm going to declare the public hearing closed. What is the
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board finds that the request is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? Mr. King, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan?
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan?
Yes.
Jason Grubbs?
Yes.
Clarence Lamb?
Yes.
Chris Leak?
Yes.
Bo McCray?
Yes.
Brenda Smith?
Yes.
Jack Steelman?
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence again. I move that the planning board recommends denial of W 3464.
Motion by Mr. Lamb.
Second.
Second by Mr. Grubbs. Mr. King, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan?
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan?
Yes.
Jason Grubbs?
Yes.
Clarence Lamb?
Yes.
Chris Leak?
Yes.
Bo McCray?
Yes.
Brenda Smith?
Yes.
Jack Steelman?
Yes.
Okay, that's 8-0. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that will bring us, the next item on your agenda is going to be item B5. That's zoning case F1600. We do have some folks here in opposition to that request. So I believe Mr. Roberts is going to give a presentation on that, and Amy is probably going to start pulling up the slideshow for that item.
All right.
Okay, the next item on your agenda is F-1600. The petitioner is Jimmy Lee Barrow, and the site is 33.41 acres located on the east side of Reedsville Road and the west side of Old Flat Rock Road, north of Vance Road in Forsyth County. It is a general use rezoning from agricultural and RS20 zoning to RS30 zoning. And I did want to emphasize that there is no site plan associated with this request. This is Legacy's growth management plan. You can see it's located in the darker green rural growth management area. And this is a zoning map showing the subject property. It's pretty much been farmland for decades. There are a few farm buildings located on the lower right-hand portion. Otherwise, it's undeveloped, has extensive frontage on Reedsville Road, and also several hundred feet of frontage on the Old Flat Rock Road. Probably about, I've got 7 acres or so is zoned on the southern portion, RS20, and then the remainder, about 26 acres are zoned AG to the north. So it's kind of in a transitional area, as you can see, between RS20 to the south and agricultural zoning in this area. There is no public sewer available. Again, being in Growth Management Area 5, there is public water within Flat Rock Road. This is an aerial image. Again, you can see the farming and large lot residential development pattern in this area. This is from Reedsville Road looking into the site. And one image there on Old Flat Rock Road. Those are those farm buildings that I mentioned earlier. And so that's looking into the site. And this is the Walkertown area plan update. This was recommended for approval by the planning board. It includes some county areas within it. So this recommends large lot residential, single family residential over 5 acres. And you can see the darker yellow, that's smaller lot, single family residential to the southwest. So the request would remove some agricultural zoning from a large tract of farmland. However, it is located in a transitional area between RS20 and AG properties. The estimated trip generation for the proposed and existing zonings is comparable. Again, there's no site plan associated with this, but just based upon the zoning potential change to RS30, it would allow potentially for up to 6 more homes than what the current zoning would allow. And the site has access to public water and extensive road frontage. So we did discuss the loss of farmland and realized that, but considering the RS20 zoning to the south, we felt like RS30 zoning was a reasonable request for this transitional tract. So staff does recommend approval, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Question,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Roberts. Mr. Roberts, what's the history on the RS20 zoning?
Well, it's a pretty extensive area to the south, George, where the RS20 is. So that's not a recent rezoning request. That was potentially done that way in 1995 when the UDO was adopted and areas were reclassified. I'm not positive, but it's a fairly large area.
Thank you.
All right, no other questions for staff.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. I have one for Gary. This is
All right.
Clarence.
Yes, sir.
Is there sewer all the way up to where the RS20 is below down there? It's not out that far, is it?
No,
Okay.
I don't know exactly how far sewer away is, but it's not within reasonable distance of this
Yeah.
site.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, no, that's fine. Thank you. All right, well, I'm going to open the public hearing. I think we do have, so I'm going to open the public hearing. Mr. King, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It looks like we've got several folks. I think we've got, by my count, 5 folks in support, and I believe we do have 1 in opposition. So we'll begin with the folks in support. I'm just going to go down the list. So first person on my list is Jim Barrow. Jim, if you're with us and you'd like to speak, please unmute yourself, provide your name and address for the record, and begin your remarks.
Please keep in mind also each side has 12 minutes.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Jim Barrow. I'm the property owner there. My house is bordered on 2 sides by this. My home address is 3720 Old Flat Rock Road. This is inherited land. It's farmland I grew up on. I have 3 daughters, none of which are interested in the property. I have a sister and her family, none of which are interested in the property, in its future. And so I was already approached earlier before I made contact with an agent to sell it as a development area, and I turned that request away because I knew what type of development it was going to be. It was going to be small lot and small houses, and I didn't like that for the area. We're just interested in selling it as we're aging and have different needs now than in the past, and want the development for that area. If it is developed, I like for it to be a nice development, an upscale development. I care very much about my neighbors and would like for them to have when it does develop, to have a nice area there with them. If you have questions, I'll be glad to answer those. The property has been leased for many, many years for agricultural purposes. The lease pretty much pays the taxes on the property, but it doesn't really gain anything for us. And this is just for our future.
All right. It looks like the next speaker signed up in support is Brian Craven. Brian, if you're with us, please unmute, give your name and address, and begin your remarks.
Yes, Brian Craven. I'm at 101 Centerport Drive in Greensboro, North Carolina 27409. I'm working with Will Yearns of Granville Homes and Yearns Properties on this project, and we'll let Amanda talk a little bit towards some of the communication we've had. But we just wanted to stress that both Will and I are local. We've been in development and construction and real estate brokerage for seems like a very long time, but 15 to 20 years. We work on projects similar to this that are what I consider county projects, where you have, public water, septic systems, then infield sites with public water and sewer available, mainly single family home development, some moderate density multifamily development like townhome communities, and focus on the triad. We feel like we try to be pretty transparent. We've been, in this case, by reaching out to the neighbors, working with Jimmy Barrow on his property. We've met on site with him a number of times, and definitely working with the staff. Gary had mentioned the property, has a portion of acreage that is already zoned RS20. So, looking to try to not move forward RS20, but stick with the general RS30, I think is pretty, accurate for the area being rural and having some potential larger residential lots. And we're here to answer any questions you guys have. I think Amanda will dive into some deeper details on the property.
Thank you. The next speaker signed up in the list is Will Yearns. Will, if you'd like to speak, please unmute, give your name and address, and begin your remarks.
Hello, everybody. This is Will Yearns, 532 Hillwood Court, Greensboro, North Carolina, 27410. And I'm here to answer any questions about the development and what I might be able to share with as far as how we're going to develop it, that sort of thing. But I would like to defer my time to Amanda.
Okay. The next person in the last 2 speakers are Vince Townsend and Amanda. I don't know how to pronounce your last name. Hodiern. Whoever wants to go next, please unmute, give your name and address, and begin your remarks.
Great, thank you. I'll dive in. I'm Amanda Hodiern. My offices are at 804 Green Valley Road in Greensboro, and I'm the attorney here tonight on behalf of this request. I represent Mr. Craven and Mr. Yearns in the entity that they have formed for this property. It's a North Carolina entity, and they have this property under contract for purchase. You've heard from my client about what they do, so I'll let them answer questions about that if you have any. So I'm going to dive quickly into the substance of this request. Mr. Roberts did a nice job with his staff report, but I want to highlight a few things. We did work diligently on the front end before filing this with Mr. Roberts to consult about what would be an appropriate and good common sense zoning district for this location. We wanted to put forth a petition that made sense and that was eminently reasonable. And we do feel that the RS30 captures that. I want to highlight a few reasons that I would submit to you this evening that this is an eminently reasonable request and would ask for your support. First, as you've heard from Mr. Roberts, it is consistent with your adopted Legacy 2030 plan. It's designated as Growth Management Area 5 here at this location, which of course RS30 is an appropriate zoning district for. The reason for that is because of the low intensity nature of RS30 and because of its emphasis on maintaining rural characteristics. In addition to just meeting that textual guidance, we're actually really bearing it out with the specifics of this particular request. As you've seen in your staff report, if you played this out just by the numbers to its full intensity, the RS30 zoning would yield just 6 more housing units than the current zoning already allows on the property, which is a very minimal incremental increase. In conjunction, looking at impacts, the traffic generation, the trip generation is increased by just 57 trips per day. Again, a very minimal, I would submit, incremental increase. Also, I studied your permitted use table today and just did a quick rundown comparison of what uses are allowed in RS30 that are not allowed in the AG district. And I really didn't find any. I found one, a bed and breakfast is allowed, but even that would, and that's not allowed in AG, but even that would require a special use permit from your Board of Adjustment. So if we were to receive approval on this rezoning, even that's not something we could go do. So I think it's important to note that this really doesn't change a lot about the nature of land use on this piece of property. I also want to highlight, if we could go to the slides that I sent in today, please, Amy. I want to talk about the compatibility with the existing land use pattern. Thank you. This is our property here highlighted in pink in the middle of the screen. And you can see around it with all the purple dots that those are individual houses or parcels. So you can see that there's a lot of subdivision, platted subdivision type of development to the, I guess, southeast here. This is, of course, that RS20 zoning that you've heard about. And then, of course, you see a lot more large lot and ag land use pattern up as you go out Reedsville Road further into the county to the northwest. And this property lies right in between, serving as a nice transition between those platted subdivisions and tapering out into more existing agriculture. Next slide, please. This is the zoning split that currently exists, which Mr. Roberts touched on and you guys started to discuss. The red line here that cuts across the middle of the slide is the zoning demarcation line between AG and RS20. So again, this is pretty zoomed in, but you can see it is a pretty wide swath of RS20. It's not just a one-off where somebody rezoned for a development. It is an actual established pattern in your zoning. And then this property, of course, sits right on that line. So a part of this request is a downzoning, which I'm sure you've noted. And you know, in doing that downzoning and asking for these minimal upticks in the incremental zoning that I've elaborated on, what you're creating is a nice transition in your zoning. You're getting a nice RS30 district here that tapers from your RS20 down to your AG. And I would submit to you as a very reasonable and sound planning practice to manage your fringe and your growth management area tier 5s. We did have some neighborhood communication that I know is detailed in your staff report. We sent out a letter to everyone on the same mailing list that your staff uses. I received a number of phone calls from that. I received 5 phone calls and called all of those folks back, had great conversations with all but one, I believe, who I left a message for and didn't hear back from. Had subsequent and follow-up phone calls, and they even exchanged some emails. So, you know, I know there's some questions. They were mostly site plan related, but I think that we were able to answer a lot of the process and procedure and intention questions. So I think we had a strong neighborhood communication. In summary, I think this is a small incremental change in zoning. It's reasonable for the reasons we've discussed. It's consistent with your legacy 2030 plan. It's compatible with the existing and established land use pattern in the area. And it provides a nice transition in your zoning, taking you from the RS20 that currently exists to the AG that currently exists on the other side. RS30 is right there in between and makes all the sense that it seems to. I'm available for questions. I think we're about running out of time, so I'll stop there and open it up to see what else you guys would like to know.
Mr. Chair, we do have one more speaker signed up in support. It's Vince Townsend. Vince, I don't know if you would like to speak on this matter. If you do, please unmute, provide your name and address, and begin your remarks. I think we've got somewhere a little bit short of 3 minutes left.
I don't need to add anything at this time, so I'm on.
Mr. Chair, I don't know if the board has any questions for the proponents. If they do, feel free to go ahead. If not, we can open this up. I do know we have one person signed up in opposition.
Looks like we can move on to the opposition.
Okay. It looks like Devin Bowman is signed up to speak in opposition. Devin, if you're with us and you'd like to have some remarks, please unmute, give your name and address for the record, and begin your remarks.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it's not Devin Bowman that's calling, it's Viola Bowman. Devin has to work the computer. So my question is, are you gonna have any outlets on 158?
Ms. Bowman, if you don't mind, could you give your address for the record?
I'm sorry. 3705 Old Flat Rock Road, Kearneysville, North Carolina, 27284.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, and please ask your question again.
Okay. Do you have any outlets planned on Highway 158?
So, Mr. Chairman, this is Aaron. I'll jump in real quick on that. I do want to remind the board this is a general use request, and for the public out there, what that general use request means is, at this stage, the planning board does not have a site plan that demonstrates how the land would be developed. What is being asked of the planning board is to basically approve a change of zoning districts independent of that site plan. So to go from the AG and the RS20 to the RS30, and if the board recommends approval of that and it's ultimately approved by the county commissioners, anything that's permitted in the RS30 district by right is allowed, and any development that would take place in that district has to comply with those standards. Should this property be developed for a subdivision, at that point in the future, an applicant would have to bring a subdivision plan back to the planning board that would demonstrate lot size, access points, layout, etc. So for the public, and just a reminder to the board, we don't have that today. What's in front of you is a general use request. Just want to make that clear, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, understood.
Okay, you want me to talk now?
Yes, ma'am, you may continue.
Okay, then I'll just vote. I disagree with the RS30 plan. And evidently that's all I'm allowed to say.
All right. Thank you. Mr. King, do we have anyone else here to speak in opposition?
Mr. Chairman, we do not. We do have one observer, Cheryl Redfern. I guess while we're here, I don't know if Ms. Redfern has a change of mind to see if she wants to speak or not. I don't.
Thank you. My name is Cheryl Redfern. I live at 7153 Mantlewood Lane, Kearneysville, North Carolina, and I represent the seller in this. And just wanted to let you know that we took great care and considered several offers actually on the property, and we got the one that we felt like would be the best one for the community. Other than that, I'm going to refer everything else to Amanda and everybody else that knows a lot more about this than I do. Thank you.
All right, Mr. King, thank you. So seeing no one else to speak, I'm going to declare the public hearing closed.
Mr. Lee?
Yes, yes, Mr.
I
Bryan?
did have a question. I mean, I read the letters that came to us, and it seemed that one of the reasons of opposition was impact to the water table. But yet what I'm hearing is there is water available. And I just wondered if the developers would confirm or say that there might be some impact on the water table.
Yes, if I may, I'll speak to that. There is public water available, and that is what we would fully intend to make use of.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Again, I'm going to declare the public hearing closed. Board, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Motion by Mr. Lamb.
Second.
Second by Mr. Grubb. Any further discussion? If not, Mr. King, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Mo McCray,
Yes.
Brenda Smith,
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence again. I move the planning board recommend approval of F1600.
Motion by Mr. Lamb.
Second.
Second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? If not, Mr. King,
Chairman,
please.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just real briefly, this is a tough one for me. This is a really transitional area. There is a tremendous amount of development pressure coming from the southwest, from Walkertown that way. The preservation of farmland is incredibly near and dear to my heart. And if there was a better solution to this, I'd probably be voting differently. But I do think that given what the property owner could do by right now, this is not much of an extension. And if it does sort of buffer some of that development pressure that may later on preserve some agricultural land, this is maybe the best that we can hope for. I will say, when if and when we see a site plan for this, I'd be curious what the developer is going to do in terms of old Flat Rock Road, because I do have some concerns about how it's going to support the volume of traffic. It's not much of a road right now. So, but yeah, I just wanted to put that out there as to why I'm voting the way I am.
Thank you, Mr. Grubbs, for your comments. So we do have a motion and a second on the floor. Mr. King, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Mo McCray,
Yes.
Brenda Smith,
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
Okay, that's 8-0, and that'll go on up to the county commissioners for their consideration afterwards. Mr. Chairman, that brings us, I think the next item on your agenda is item B6, that's zoning case F1601. I believe Gary's going to make a presentation on that one, and Amy will probably be pulling up the slideshow to begin that.
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, next item on your agenda is F1601. The petitioner is Williams Land Trust, David G. Williams heirs. And the site is 19.85 acres located on the south side of Stires Ferry Road between Stires Ferry Trail and Stires Crossing Lane. It is a special use rezoning with a site plan from RS40 to NOS, Neighborhood Office Special Use, for the uses of combined use residential single family and offices. This is Legacy's growth management plan. This site also is located in growth management area 5, the rural area, on the opposite side of the county, closer to the Yadkin River. It is in the Yadkin River watershed, and it's just outside of the Clemens corporate limits, but within their comprehensive plan. This is a zoning map showing the subject property. It does have a small pond on it. In the central location, you can see there's a single-family home also in the central location of the site. There on the south side of Stires Ferry Road. Again, it's currently zoned RS40, single-family residential, agricultural zoning to the south, RS40 to the east, agricultural, and RS30 to the west. Across the site is the Evo Corporation. That's a building contractor operation, and that GI zoning has been in place since 1970. Aerial image showing the subject property primarily undeveloped, mostly heavily wooded there. Some evergreen trees there along the Stires Ferry entrance and the surrounding development pattern. This is the entrance into the site. This would be reworked a little bit, widened if it was improved. That's on the south side of Stires Ferry Road. That's looking west on Stires Ferry. The site is to the left. And then across the street into that GI zoning that I mentioned. It is located within the Clemens Comprehensive Plan adopted in 2019. And this recommends future growth area, large lot, single family residential, does not recommend a change in zoning. And included in your packet was a 2-page memorandum from the planning director for Clemens for the village town planner, stating that this request for NO zoning in the GMA 5 area is not consistent with their plan. This is a site plan showing the subject property there, Stires Ferry Road being to the right, showing the existing driveway that would need to be widened, going down into the single family home that would be converted to an office use. It's about 3,000 square feet. They're showing about 320 square foot of addition to that existing footprint, some official parking area. They would have to have a buffer yard, type 2 buffer yard around the parking area there and along that driveway entrance there. So basically kind of an adaptive reuse of that existing building there, although residential is one of the uses that they're asking for. So again, it's in growth management area 5. Legacy does not recommend office zoning in the rural area. The NO district purpose statement does not include GMA 5 as one of the preferred districts for this, preferred GMAs for this use, this district. And approval could establish a precedent for other similar rezonings in this general area. And as I mentioned, it's not consistent with the Village Community Compass 2040 Comprehensive Plan, nor is it supported by the Village of Clemens. And I'll be glad to answer any questions. Staff's recommendation is for denial.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Any questions for staff?
I have
Mr.
a quick
Roberts?
question.
Yes.
Mr. Roberts, do you know what type of office use? If they're combining it with residential, is it supposed to be an office attached to a home?
Well, I think you'll hear from, I think the applicant's getting ready to probably tell you a little bit more detail of exactly what they're looking to do there.
Great.
But there's been no office use to date. There's no precedent.
You mean on the subject property?
Yeah.
I could not say that. I don't know. It's not zoned that way, but I can't.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, then I'm gonna, looks like we have people here to speak. So Mr. Kim, I'm gonna turn it over to you. I'm gonna open the public hearing at this time.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, so we have 3 speakers signed up in support and no one signed up in opposition. So we'll jump right in, and the first person on the list is John Gatto. John, if you'd like to give some remarks, unmute yourself, give your name and address, and begin your remarks.
I'm going to defer my time to David Niblock. Thank you.
Okay, David, I see you there. Good afternoon. Go ahead and unmute, give your name and address for the record, and begin your remarks.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Chairman, members of the board, it's nice to be with you today. John Lipka, who has been on the point for our engineering sorts of matters. If it please the board, I would like to let John speak first, and then I will follow that up with a just short summary of kind of what we are contemplating. And by the way, just for clarification, oh, we've changed it to Niblock. I was Diplock there for a few minutes, so I'm glad to see the name is accurate. So if that's okay, Mr. King, I would propose to do that.
Aaron, you're on mute.
Sorry. Without objection, Mr. Chair, we'll call on John Lipka. If he'd like to begin his remarks, go ahead, give your name and address for the record and begin your remarks.
Thanks, Aaron. John Lipka. I'm the civil engineer. Address is 514 Edwards Road in Rural Hall. And thank you also, Gary, for your report. Obviously, not what we wanted to see for recommendation, but I wanted to provide a little bit of insight to the development of the property from the engineer's perspective and the impacts. First of all, because of the use, I'm sorry, I have my friend here. The proposed use is going to be a little more explained by the owner, an owner's rep, my client after I get done as far as the use of the facility. But limited impacts as far as traffic goes. We have proposed 10 parking spaces. We anticipate maybe 4 or 5 of those being used at a time. And as far as the frequency of the use of the space, I can let my client speak to that a little bit more. But relatively no impacts to traffic. We are adding some impervious surface area. There's a downstream pond which is on site. So again, relatively no impacts to the environment for the little bit of an additional impervious we're adding to widen the driveway. We've had conversations with the adjacent property owners in our neighborhood outreach regarding visual impacts. The 2 immediate property owners to the east and their residents, they did go to our outreach meeting or were participants. They did have concerns about what the impacts would be. There is several hundred feet of existing natural canopy buffer between this property and their residences. And we are required to do a type 2 landscape buffer if our site plan gets approved to the east. So that would add to the already existing pretty extensive canopy of buffer that's there. And I think that kind of summarizes the impacts to the site. Very little as far as the specific use of the site and the benefits to Forsyth County. And really the benefits that would meet the owner's intents for the use of the property. I'll have my client speak to that effect. And David, if you want to take it from here. Thank you.
Mr. King, may I proceed?
Absolutely.
Okay, to my right, members of the board sits Joseph Gatto, who is the trustee under the last will and trust of David Williams. The proposed use for this property, I will begin by saying that each day in Forsyth County, probably in a dozen or so or more locations, folks engage in what we call alternative dispute resolution processes. Frequently, that consists of mediation. Sometimes it is arbitration, but mediation is a voluntary endeavor for folks to resolve disputes that they may have between them without having to avail themselves of our court system. It is very worthwhile. It is very successful. And the idea of the Williams Dispute Resolution Center, which is in fact the proposed use of this property, is to provide a pastoral setting in a minimal, in a situation that's not necessarily office space or high-rise space, where folks can come together and have the opportunity to meet with a mediator, perhaps an arbitrator, but more likely it will be a mediator the great majority of the time, and resolve these disputes. This is consistent with the wishes of Dave Williams, and it's consistent with the acts of the trust. And we don't think that it is inconsistent with any of the neighborhood, although I honor and respect the recommendation for denial because of the reasons set forth. In fact, there will be this use will be more minimal, but much more meaningful than any potential use that would be allowed in terms of residential development in this location. As I said, it would provide the opportunity for folks to resolve disputes in a way that is both productive, constructive, and consistent with the wishes of Dave Williams. From a traffic standpoint, as I said, it will be less problematic than if it was developed as would otherwise be allowed. It is a not-for-profit endeavor, folks. I want to make perfectly clear this is not something being considered for commercial reasons at all. So if I could clarify that, you've seen the site plan. It would involve folks arriving. At the most that there would be in the actual house or the building at any one time would be maybe 6, 8, 10 people at the very most. That would be a busy day, I think would be an accurate statement of that. So we're excited about this possibility because it isn't inconsistent with anything in the neighborhood other than the not residential. The support we've received from the outreach efforts has been across the board. I believe you commented there's no one there in opposition to this. It's actually very nice from my standpoint to be involved in something that feels this good for the neighborhood, the community, the county. And so understanding the challenges that we face, we would respectfully ask you to consider approving us for that purpose. And I'll be glad to answer any questions or would tender up Mr. Gatto, who is here with me, as I said, or Mr. Lipka.
Mr. Chairman, I believe if no one else has anything to say on the proponent side, those are all the speakers we have for this item.
Can I just take one moment as a trustee, sir, if I can have permission to speak for just less than 1 minute. I am Joe Gatto, 521 Ridgehaven Circle, Winston-Salem 27104. I'm the trustee of this trust. David Williams was my client and my friend. I'm obviously an attorney. David Niblock and I do a lot of mediations and we deal with the conflicts. We've especially done a lot of them during the COVID period because of the delays that occurred at the courthouse. Our intention and the trust does not allow this property to be developed. That's a condition of this property. But we wanted to use it as some type of community-based resource. And we looked at several options and we thought the pastoral setting would be able to serve as a community-based resource. It will be nonprofit. It will just offer a venue to people to come and try to have their disputes resolved in an area where there are trees, where there's a pond, in which again, the atmosphere would lend itself to avoiding litigation and to some degree, hopefully, lessening to some extent the massive backlog that we're going to have of cases since the courthouse essentially been shut down for the last year. So we really thought that would be a valid approach, and we do not, especially Mr. Williams, would not want to do anything to disturb the natural surroundings and the natural aspects of this property. That's the last thing we want to do. So having said that, I just appreciate any consideration, and I do understand how it may not be consistent with the long-term plan, but we would hope that this would be in addition and would not disturb the rural growth plan. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so very much, Mr. Gatto.
Here, could I ask a question of one of the presenters?
Sure.
Mr. Niblock, what is the current latitude within the law of using the house as a home office or an office that occasionally sees people or somebody does work out of?
Are you talking, Mr. Bryant, about a private home and the possibility to use an office in that respect?
Right. I mean, it's very common in various areas to have like accountants that are in home and stuff, as long as there aren't, traffic and businesses.
Probably Mr. King would be better positioned to speak to that as to the zoning aspects of it. I think that it does take place. It's always, to me, seemed to be a matter of degree. But of course, that is why we're trying to actually have this zoning done so we can have this use appropriately and according to the zoning.
Yeah, George, I think what kind of holds it up here is it has to be your primary residence. And then on top of that, there are restrictions on terms of square footage and other things that's a really tightly restricted provision in the UDO is the home occupation. And I think what's being contemplated here goes above and beyond what's really done with the home occupation provisions.
So this won't be being used as a residence as well, is what you're saying?
No, sir. No,
okay.
Sir.
Okay.
I had a question for the staff. I don't know if Mr. Roberts or Mr. King can answer this, but given that you feel that this is a use that's not really warranted in GMA 5, would it rise to the level of spot zoning?
Well, Linda, we looked at that, and I think if you look across the street, there's a big chunk of GI there, and then a little bit further in the southeast of there, there's some campus zoning there. And so given those two kind of, I don't want to say blemishes, but non-residential zonings on the zoning map, we didn't feel like it would rise to the level of spot zoning,
Okay.
illegal spot zoning, sorry.
All right, are there any additional questions?
What would this is, Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence, or I guess, I don't know, Gary or Aaron, I'm not sure. What will be the permitted use? I mean, I'm trying to find out how much we can lock it down with land use planning here.
Yeah, so I think we were kind of anticipating that question. The use in our UDO is offices, and I asked Desmond to look into our SIC code to see if there's anything we could further restrict it to in the office category. Desmond, what'd you find?
There is not a the standard industrial classification manual is what we use to kind of further parse down uses. There's not anything that really specifies. There is a separate classification for attorneys and legal offices, but they're not really separated from the use classification offices. If the board were inclined and the petitioners were inclined to agree to a condition to restrict the use, you could add that condition that it couldn't be used for anything other than attorney offices, but really there's not a great way for us to enforce that if it gets adopted, because the only way we would know that somebody was using it for any kind of other office would be if they changed a sign.
Yeah. Desmond's correct. If the board is so inclined and the applicant is in agreement, we can add a condition under other requirements that says the use office should be further restricted to SIC code, and Desmond will insert that, which is the SIC code for the legal offices Desmond referenced. We've done that on a few occasions before.
Yeah, this is Brenda. I was looking at through the ordinance and definitions. Is there anything related to nonprofit community service type organization that wouldn't strictly fall in the office category that would allow something to be compliant in the GMA 5?
I think when we heard this, when we talked through this with Chris, we were thinking based on what we heard, the closest use as we classified it was still going to be offices. And so that's what prompted the NO rezoning.
Okay.
So one concern I would have with a use restriction limiting it to attorneys' offices, as I sit in one making these remarks, is you could wind up with a much more intensive use if it was truly being used as a law office than what's being contemplated here. So I almost think it's kind of the law of unintended consequences. You lock it into being used as an attorney office, and then the dispute resolution thing comes and goes, and then you got 3 attorneys sitting in there with 6 staff members and people coming and going 10 times a day. And I think I'd be careful about doing that if it were up to me.
Is there any classification of nonprofit that could fit into some of the other categories that are there, as far as what is currently allowed in that zoning that you could then get a special use permit for? Something like that?
Nothing, Desmond, you're probably closer to that than I am, but nothing comes to my mind. Club or lodge is a non-profit-y kind of use, but I don't think that's what this is being, what's been described here fits in that. Again, is what we've heard today, and I think in previous conversations, I think we've got the correct land use, and then I think they've selected the best zoning district to try to limit the impacts and make this as palatable as they can.
What about campus? Is there any way to sort of bootstrap your way into it being a camp? I mean, that to me is what it seems like more than anything else. And I don't know whether there's an educational requirement for campus zoning or not, but you've also got some nearby campus zoning. It feels campusy.
So campus is a zoning district, not a use. I'm not sure that our recommendation would necessarily change if the petitioners decided to change their request to campus rather than NO. We need to do some evaluating, but I think overall, the request to change the use to any kind of non-residential zoning that's more intense than what's already there is going to be inconsistent with what our area plan says and what the Clemens Comprehensive Plan says.
It's amazing. I think it's an awesome request for the use for what they're trying to do. And it seems like hearing the majority of the board feels the same way. So would anyone like to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, let's make sure you close that public hearing.
Okay, yeah. I'm now going to close the public hearing.
Thank you.
Everyone has spoken. So what is the pleasure of the board? We can move forward.
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I'm going to make an unusual, we've talked about this before, whether we can actually do this, but I think we can. I'm going to move that the planning board finds that the request is actually inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, but I'm going to then make a second motion to approve this. Staff evidently did do some research. I was concerned, like Melinda, about potential spot zone. The attorneys are, city and county attorneys are worried about those kinds of things. There is no opposition from the neighbors. And so, anyway, I move that the planning board find that the request is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan.
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. King, would you call the roll for that, please?
George Bryan,
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan,
Yes.
Jason Grubbs,
Yes.
Clarence Lamb,
Yes.
Chris Leak,
Yes.
Bo McCray,
Yes.
Brenda Smith,
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence again. I'm going to move that the planning board recommend approval of F-1601.
Second.
We moved in second. Any further discussion?
Yes.
Yeah. You go ahead, George.
I don't know if other board members have had a chance to read the Clemens 2040 plan, but it is so clear in the Clemens plan that this whole area should be rural preservation. I mean, they define it, they clarify it, they underline it. And if Clemens is saying, wait a minute, we don't want precedence here, I think the fact that it is inconsistent and is so carefully planned out through a process with Clemens speaks to the point that we need to be careful about precedence. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, I also wanted to kind of speak along the same lines that Mr. Bryan did. I'm really concerned about the precedent issue. I understand why the petitioners would want us to use this property for that use, and I think it's a good use, but I think we really need to be concerned about the precedent that we potentially would be setting here with an approval. Especially, and what concerns me is the GI across the street, which is very inconsistent. And I don't know how that got approved, but in any case, it's there. And when you have a GI across the street and then you have an NOS, I mean, how are we going to say no to the next petitioner who comes along and wants another neighborhood office? So I find it very problematic from that point of view.
And if I could hop in, I just want to make sure I heard something correctly from Joe, which I believe you said that the trust has committed to, in effect, forego development rights for the remainder of the property. Is that correct or not?
That is correct. The trust itself prohibits any development of the property. That is, it couldn't be developed for housing or residential use. It must be preserved as closely as in natural state as possible.
Would that include the possibility of a conservation easement or donation to Clemens so that it protects the agricultural nature of the property and the surrounding area and gives to a valid nonprofit entity a great location?
I don't know if the specific terms of the trust will allow that. I certainly would not be adverse to that. It would be consistent with keeping the property preserved and as natural as possible. I don't know if that's a good enough answer, but I don't know definitively whether the authority exists to do that in terms of the trust being able to convey it.
Right. The other thing I would say is to concern regarding precedents. That's always an important consideration. But with myself having been in related businesses to this in Winston-Salem since 1990, I would say the opportunity for anyone to walk into the door and to walk in the door and effect to give away the development rights for 95, 98% of their acreage is not a precedence that you're going to see very frequently, and one that'll be almost impossible to match.
So rather than go the route of a conservation easement, I don't know what the plan for post rezoning would be in terms of whether the trust is going to continue ownership of the property or if it's going to be conveyed to some nonprofit entity. We keep hearing nonprofit, which makes me think maybe there's going to be an entity that's formed or has already been formed. So, I wonder about some kind of negative development easement and the conveyance.
Jason, let me jump in because we've had a couple comments on that. I just want to put two things in the record. One, for the board, keep in mind, we obviously don't monitor what that trust does or doesn't do. We don't enforce that. But what we do enforce is the site plan that's been submitted with this request. And the site plan that's been submitted with your request doesn't show any proposed grade lines on the site, really outside of the area that's being contemplated for development to put the parking in by the house. So if somebody were to come in to get a grading permit for us, we're not going to issue it because there's no proposed grading going on this. So you, by virtue of the site plan included with this, you have a pretty solid level of conservation going on in the fact that the site plan restricts the grading activity here. So I just want to make that clear for the record.
All right, so there's a present motion and second on the floor. Mr. King, would you please call the roll if there's no further discussion?
George Bryan?
No.
Melinda Dunnigan?
No.
Jason Grubbs?
Yes.
Clarence Lamb?
Yes.
Chris Leak?
Yes.
Mo McCray?
Yes.
Brenda Smith?
Yes.
Jack Steelman?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 6-2. And Mr. Chairman, that brings us to the last zoning item on your agenda, and that is item B7, and it's zoning case F1602. Gary Roberts will be making a presentation on this one. Gary, you're muted.
Apologize. This is zoning docket F1602. Petitioner is Tammy Weevil and Timothy Weevil. The site is 10 acres located at the southeast quadrant of I-74, former US 311 and High Point Road. It's a special use rezoning from agricultural to LIS, limited industrial special use. Also with a special intense development allocation, or otherwise known as CEDA. So this is in the Abbott's Creek watershed. So lot sizes and impervious coverage are governed in that area because it is a drinking water supply watershed. And so they need to exceed the 24% built upon, which is only allowed in this watershed. And that has to go to the county commissioners. So that's called a CEDA when you ever exceed the 24% built upon. Those are the uses there that they're asking for: building contractors, general, heavy, and offices, along with warehousing. Legacy's growth management plan is located within the light green future growth management area. Currently, there are no city county utilities available in this area. High Point does have water that is going to serve this site if approved. However, there is no sewer in this area currently. This is a zoning map showing the subject property. It's currently undeveloped. As you can see there, right at the quadrant of I-74 and High Point Road. It's currently zoned AG as all the properties surrounding it to the north, east, and west. You have some industrial zoning, GIS across High Point Road. That's currently where the Martin Marietta rock quarry is located, and the Laughlin concrete facility is also there to the southwest. Aerial image showing the subject property that's heavily wooded. There are some farming areas on that, some farmland further to the east. You can see the quarry across the street. A couple of images taken on site. This is looking southeast on High Point Road. The site is to the left. You have the quarry across the road there to the right. This is at the quarry entrance looking into the site. And this is just outside of the Laughlin concrete site. They're looking up to the subject property there to the upper right. So this is located within the southeast Forsyth County area plan. As you can see, the purple would be industrial use reflective of the existing zoning there across the street. The light yellow is the recommended land use. That's large lot residential zoning and development for this property. However, due to its access there to the interstate, the area plan does specifically call this out as a special land use area, SLUCA AD. So you can see that red circle there in the middle. This is a part of a 165 acre special land use condition area that does recommend a business park in this area if sewer becomes available. There are no plans for city county to extend sewer to this area. It's in a different, it's not in the Muddy Creek drainage basin, but this is a possibility for High Point sewer eventually to come up this far. So the request is not consistent with the area plan, as I'll mention, for a comprehensive business park. So this is the subject property, the site plan there. It's about 27,000 square feet shown there in purple of industrial building, warehousing, and general contractor. One entrance there onto High Point Road and parking, and then a very large gravel area for storage of equipment. They're located across behind the building. You have I-74 to the north. They've got the 20-foot thoroughfare overlay buffer yard there. Septic field there in the upper left corner, and stormwater controls to the right. And so again, with impervious coverage, they're showing about 53% impervious coverage. Anything in the watershed WS3 over 24%, they have to request a special intense development allocation and also install the stormwater pond. So in your staff report, we gave you the 5 findings recommended in the UDO, actually not recommended, but there are 5 criteria which the county commissioners have to find an affirmative finding on all 5 of those. And that's why I've got the word all there shown in red. The blue findings, which I'll go over briefly, are the ones that we believe that the request is generally consistent with those. However, the first and foremost there is the project is in conformance with the adopted legacy. Shown in yellow there, the area plans are an extension of legacy. As I mentioned earlier, the area plan does recommend business and industrial development on this property, but when sewer becomes available and as a part of a business park that can really maximize the development of this whole area there being adjacent to the interstate. So we see it as kind of a fragmented approach that really may hinder the future maximization of this property, and do not feel that it's consistent with that first finding. The second one is compatible with the general character of the surrounding area. It certainly is. You have some undeveloped property located to the south of it, and industrial zoning, as I mentioned, across the street. The third finding is that it has a significant benefit to the local economy, either retention of jobs or new tax base. Those numbers there reflect what they're proposing that would meet both of those that requirement, that criteria. The fourth is it would not pose a threat to the environment. and they would have to comply with state DENR environmental controls regarding stormwater, as I mentioned earlier. And proposed project has good transportation access, including proximity to major roads and rail lines. And again, they are along a major thoroughfare, High Point Road, which has ample capacity and adjacent to the interstate. So in summary, there is intense industrial activity located across the street. However, this request is not consistent with the Southeast Forsyth County area plan because sewer is not available, and this is not a business park request. This is a small incremental site. And the third bullet would be that it could negatively impact the prospect of a large-scale, comprehensively planned industrial development at this site. And finally, it does not meet all of the criteria for CETA. So staff recommends denial for the zoning and denial for the CETA. And with granting of CETA, the site plan does meet UDO requirements. So this is actually a three-part vote on your behalf. It would be consistency vote, and then a vote on the zoning, and then a vote on the CETA. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I have a question for Gary.
Yes, sir.
Gary, how much acreage how much assemblage would be required before that first condition would be met?
Well, that's a good question. When nobody has a crystal ball for a hypothetical scenario, but certainly this is what, 10 acres, so maybe 1/16 of the whole 165 acres. This clearly does not meet it. It's hard to say. Certainly something much larger than this, and with coordinated access to other properties, that doesn't really minimize the maximum potential of this. I really couldn't give a specific acreage. I don't know if the director would either. We really would have to see it and respond to something.
Yeah, Clarence, I'll echo what Gary said. I don't think there's a magic number in staff size. I think what staff's concerned about is if you see this one go industrial, then the next, 7 or 8 acres beside it or down the street, and then it starts eroding over time with that precedent that's set. And I think, for staff's point of view, this is one of the areas we've kind of seen this southeast portion of Forsyth County and this eastern section of Forsyth County really starting to get a lot of traction for economic development, industrial development. And we've talked at length, the board knows what a challenge it is to find land for economic development and industrial parks. So while we fully understand sewer is not there today and there's some challenges with that, we know what a fight that is to get that land set aside for that, and staff size to start to chip away at that makes that a harder possibility to realize down the road. So that's where staff's at on this. There's not a real magic number for us, but that was our concern.
Thank you.
I had a question also for Mr. Roberts.
Yes, ma'am.
What you mentioned that the gravel storage area could be used for equipment. What would actually be allowed for storage? And I'm really wondering if there could be materials that might impact water quality.
Well, the LI district does not allow a lot of outside storage, but with the uses of building contractor, heavy, that would be major equipment associated with that use. As far as water quality, I really could not speak to that. They are showing the pond there. So, but as far as the specifics of water quality management, and I would not be able to speak to that. Maybe the petitioner could address that a little bit more. I hope that answers some of your questions.
For example, piles of building materials would not be allowed, just equipment?
That's my understanding. I think what manufacturing C allows for outside storage. And so I'm thinking maybe my colleagues could flesh that out some, but that's not one of the uses that they're asking for.
I will jump in here if I can. Gary's right. Manufacturing C is the kind of industrial use that allows the most stuff to be outside. Usually for the building contractor uses, it's not building materials, it's actually the equipment that they use to do their work that is allowed to be stored outside. Any other type of materials are usually going to be inside in kind of a warehouse environment.
And Melinda, I'll just add to that real quick. There's some, and I'm reading from the watershed section of our ordinance, prohibited and restricted uses and activities, spill containment structures required. New non-residential development must incorporate adequately designed, constructed, and maintained spill containment structures for hazardous materials used, stored, manufactured on the premises. And then it goes on to say that a professional engineer shall basically certify that. So there are some standards in the watershed ordinance that at least hit on some of that.
Okay, thank you.
But also, I will note that sewer is not available, so they will be using a septic system there, and that's obviously not ideal in a water supply watershed.
I'd like to hop in and say, I would proudly like to be remembered as someone that would, as greatly as anyone, appreciate the preservation of this 165 acres of land for tax base and employment growth in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County, and the Triad. In the absence of sewer and in the absence of a coordinated plan to help start facilitating this and to get municipalities like Winston-Salem, Forsyth County, and High Point starting to talk to each other and work together, it's less than likely to happen. So I would ask, have we begun those conversations? And if not, is it time to do so? So that we're not guilty of putting something on a map that other departments in Raleigh have done, that they called a Beltway and didn't have the money to do it for 30 years and still don't.
So to answer your question, Jack, is yes, those conversations in earnest have begun. And the reason they have begun is, as the planning board knows, you guys approved 100-ish acres on the east side of Walberg Road for industrial development. That's beginning to develop now. And as I mentioned to you, there's a lot of traction and interest in that Walberg Union Cross area.
Right.
And so the city and the county both have contracts with Greater Winston-Salem, Inc. for economic development recruitment purposes. One of the things they will tell you is that we need to have land available for economic development. And we're bringing Mark Owens in at your work session in April, and I'm sure he'll speak to that. In those conversations, we mentioned the limitation of sewer. As I told you, the southeastern part of the county has validated itself. The limitation is the sewer. So we have had some conversations about where the limitations are, possible ideas and thoughts about what could happen. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen tomorrow. These have been very, very high level conversations in earnest, but that conversation is already started. I think it's gotten on the radar to the point where it's at least being thought about.
Should we see this opportunity, or rather as an opportunity for a special area plan or whatever they're called, Aaron?
What I would say, Jack, is obviously, our growth management plans are reflective of where utilities or public infrastructure is provided and exists. And I would think if something like that were to move forward and to get some legs with it, and if it was going that way, I think there would need to be a coordinated conversation between the planning board and the utilities commission to talk about, okay, if this is going to happen, what does that mean for the growth management plan? Those boundaries need to be revisited? What does that mean? So again, I want to stress very clearly, those were really, really high level conversations. But if they were to move forward, I think that would be something we would definitely want to coordinate.
Okay,
Jack, this is Kirk. One other thing, just to chime in and add on what Aaron was saying regarding your question there. I think, as you all know on the board, we're going to be starting our update of the Legacy 2030 Comprehensive Plan in earnest in the next fiscal year.
Right.
That actually provides the perfect time for the board, as well as the general public, to kind of think about, as Aaron said, the growth management plan, but also consider economic development. We certainly had an economic development chapter in the past, and recognizing the finite amount of serviceable land for industrial development in the county, balancing all those things. So I just wanted to keep the board aware of that opportunity coming up in the near future as well.
And that's a great opportunity. Could I ask what you think a completion time line might look like rather than a commencement?
For the comprehensive plan, Jack, I think, again, without knowing the specifics of the public outreach and things that we're going to be bringing to the board this summer to kind of start that discussion, I would throw out a rough 2-year timeline. But again, we're going to have more robust discussions with the board as this goes on over the coming months.
Okay, thank you.
If the board doesn't mind, I think we need to be considerate of the time, and let's open up the public hearing now, and we can come back to questions after we have the public hearing. We do have people waiting to speak.
Mr. Chairman, if you're ready to begin, it looks like we have 3 speakers signed up in support and somebody signed up as possibly against. So we'll begin at the top of the list. Bo Drew is the first person signed up. Mr. Drew, if you'd like to offer some remarks, unmute, provide your name and address, and begin your remarks.
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
All right, can you see me? I can see y'all.
We can't see you.
All right, I'll go then with that. So first, thank you for your patience. Oh, hold on, so you can see me. All right, thank you. Thank you for your patience. So now, Mr. King, Mr. Chairman, can y'all see and hear me now?
Yes.
We got you.
All right, thank you. I'm Bo Drew, full name LSB Drew III. I'm an attorney, Craig Jenkins. I actually work with David Niblock. His office is right next door to mine, 110 Oakwood Avenue, Suite 300. There are 3 of us in support. I will go first and then yield to David Smith and Ben Sturgill, and David will speak to any questions you have about the use, although Gary covered that. I sent in 2 submissions last week, neighborhood outreach, and also sent in a supplement or a submission with additional points why this should be allowed. Before I get to that, we'll take 90 seconds or so to talk about the draft staff report. There's the vast majority of it says check, 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 check. It's located along a major thoroughfare. It's distant from any single family homes. We're not trying to put something in a neighborhood. The proposed industrial uses are compatible with the uses in this area. As has been noted, directly across the street is a Martin Marietta quarry concrete plant, and beside that a grading company. The site has access to High Point Road, a major thoroughfare. I-74 is less than a mile down the road. Minimum traffic issues, and so all those things are covered. In fact, as to Gary's credit, as he put up the 5 A, B, C, D, E, I'll address A because the first B, C, D, E are all compatible. So like, what is the issue and why the denial? Staff has a concern essentially that this business is too small. That's essentially it. And we would disagree with that. And I touched on some of these with the submission. We had the board just had a candid discussion about, well, what if, when, how long, sewer. I won't repeat everything that was said. What you have in front of you is the right here, right now, and a certainty that a business will go in. It does not need access to the sewer. That land's been there for a while. The plan's been there for a while. There'll be discussions for a while. But at some point, somebody needs to be first. And my client's willing to be first. And he's ready, willing, and able to do it. The ones across the street they're all in support of this application. One of the reasons to be there is he supports those businesses across the street. I'm gonna let David Smith tell you about the location of his business and why it really, in our opinion, does not interfere with the legacy plan. But this project does provide an economic benefit. It's not pose a threat to the environment. It's not need the sewer. It's consistent with the zoning of this property. And again, right across the street are these businesses. So we would urge that this board respectfully give serious consideration and vote to approve the application. I'll save my time permitting to make sure that Ben Sturgill and David have time for their comments as
Okay, Ben, or I guess that's David Smith, whoever would like to go next, please unmute, name and address for the record and begin your remarks.
Yes, I'm David Smith. I live at 130 Prescott Drive, High Point, North Carolina. We've been looking for property for a couple of years to suit our needs. And when this property came up, it was perfect. You know, across from a rock quarry, concrete plant, asphalt plant, all of whom we do business with, as well as a church a quarter of a mile down the street that I actually attend. But this particular piece of property, because of access to the highway, really fits our needs. And, you know, the way we look at it, this 10 acres that we're looking at purchasing sets up in a corner. And, you know, 165 acres are around that. And it's not like it's in the middle of it or it's on the left-hand side or the rear. It's in a corner tucked away that we feel like a future development could be built around it. You know, the property does not have sewer. And as y'all said, no plans to construct the sewer in the near future. We would be using septic field. So, you know, we feel like that we're consistent with what the future use would be and what the current use would be. You have 2 churches, 2 schools, a fire station, as we said, asphalt plant, concrete plant, a convenience store. You know, there's really nothing consistent with that in that area. So my point would be, moving forward, we would be using a consistent use for that piece of property. Thank you.
I think the last speaker is Ben Sturgill in support.
Yes, hello everybody. Appreciate your time. Ben Sturgill, address 3408 North Elm Street, Greensboro, representing the applicant David Smith. I'll only say a couple points. The current owners of the property, Tim and Tammy Weevil, that we have the property under contract with, have owned this property for a very long time, and they wish to sell the property, and my client wishes to purchase it. Surrounding neighbors have been notified. We have got no opposition from anybody. And also, we believe there's a decent precedent that was set with the GI zoning across the street with the rock quarry, the concrete plant, and the grading company. And we hope that the board is consistent with our precedent. And Bo Drew had a good point that maybe David Smith's business is too small. Well, we hope the board values small local businesses. Mr. Smith has been lived in this area his entire life. His business is a staple in the community. It's currently owned by him and operated in Davidson County, and he wishes to move it to Forsyth County. You saw the economic benefit that this is going to bring for the area and for the residents. So with all that said, being tucked away in the corner of this property, we feel is not going to inhibit any future business park development. And David is more than willing to participate and contribute to that development as he would encourage it. And that's all I'll say.
Bo, I see your lips moving, but you're on mute.
Okay, I think we have 3 or 4 minutes, 3 minutes left. May I take our allotted time for some summation? To reiterate 3 points. First, the location of this business is, as we've been alluded to, David Smith's not asking to put this in the middle of this proposed park or somewhere we'd have to work around it. He's right. It's just a corner right off High Point Road. And reasonable minds can differ, but it's, from our view, a little difficult to see how this would be disruptive or inconsistent with the plan. He's not trying to put it in the middle of it. In that regard, I think this has some similarity to the case that you just heard. Our position, which we've been arguing, is that this proposed zoning request is consistent with the long-term plan. I won't repeat everything we said, but should members of this board agree, in the alternative, we would ask that the planning board do a second motion that even if inconsistent, approve the request for all the reasons that are in the application and that you've heard today. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I believe that was all the speakers. You, Bo, I think I was getting some feedback. I think that was all the speakers in support. We do have a Terry Smith here who said possibly in opposition. I don't know if Mr. Terry Smith is here. If you'd like to offer any comments, please feel free to unmute, offer your name and address, and begin your remarks.
Terry Smith, 173 Valley View Drive, Lexington, NC, 27295. I'm really not in opposition, but I have two legal easements through this property that concerns me. I'm willing to move them, but I haven't heard anything from anyone. The first thing that comes into the property is Boyd Street. It's 40 foot wide. It comes in approximately 400 foot, and then it turns left on Midway Street, which is 40 foot wide, and goes to my property, which sets up in the yellow, the little green piece you see, borders my property. That gives me easement to my property, which I had 20 more acres over there that I lost to Interstate 73 in 1971. So, Interstate 74, excuse me. So I'm willing to move my easements, but I need to hear from someone, and there is water on this property. It flows through it. It's been there all my life, and it flows into Abbott's Creek.
All right.
Did you hear me?
Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
And my easements are recorded at the Register of Deeds office. I have the paperwork on it. They've been recorded since 1925.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, I had to step away from my other computer died. I had to get on another one. So technology sometimes. Any additional questions for the public hearing?
Well, I'm Zach Smith, 4370 Dixie Drive. I live here at the farm, the family farm. My father just spoke. I do actually work for Martin Marietta, the rock quarry directly across the road. I pull 40 to 50 hours a week at the quarry. And I do occasionally see the Smith Jennings trucks come in, but usually they go to the Vulcan down the road. Maybe if they move up here, we'll get their business. That would be good for my paycheck and everybody else's. I farm with Dad in the evening. Our main concern is we don't want to lose our access to our fields that we make an income off of. It's not a lot, but there's still an income. The branch that my dad spoke of, we cannot cross it to get to this field from our adjoining property because of the terrain. It's just not feasible. I do run heavy equipment, but I don't own it. We've always come in up through High Point Road. And the first gentleman that spoke about this, that says there's not a lot of traffic on High Point Road, is obviously not ridden on this road because we have to fight this traffic with tractors and equipment going to other fields. So it is a heavily trafficked road, unfortunately. We just want to make sure we get our access to our land, and that
we do have it.
And we want it documented and keep it. My dad was told it was by word of mouth. That's not the case. This has been, like I said, in the records for quite a while, longer than any of us have been alive, probably. And we want to get that on record for this, for because my dad, when he leaves us, I need it for my records. So I'm thinking y'all understand that. And as Jason Grubbs mentioned earlier, when we was waiting our turn, farmland trust, we strongly are for farmland, and we hate to see it dwindle away in this county as it has. But that's the progress of life in this area, unfortunately. And we are in the farm set aside program of Forsyth County. And, we just, like I said, my dad needs his access to our property. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any further questions or comments for anyone who spoke in the public hearing? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing. What is the motion of the board?
And Mr. Chair, before anybody goes there, as a reminder, Gary did mention we're working hard tonight, 3 separate actions on this.
Right, consistency, zoning, and setup. Got it.
You got it. You got it.
Would anyone like to move a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This is Melinda Dunnigan. I'd like to make a motion that this F 1602 is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan.
There's a motion by Ms. Dunnigan. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Ms. McRae. Ms. King, would you please call the roll if there's no further discussion?
George Bryan?
No.
Melinda Dunnigan?
Yes.
Jason Grubbs?
No.
Clarence Lamb?
No.
Chris Leak?
Yes.
Bo McCray?
Yes.
Brenda Smith?
No.
Jack Steelman?
No.
Okay, that looks like the motion passes 5-3 by my count. So next up would be your action on the zoning case itself.
And Mr. Chairman, this is Melinda again. I'd like to make the motion.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, and I'm sorry, Ms. Dunnigan. Was your motion to say that the request was inconsistent with the
Yes.
with the legacy? Yeah. And I thought I heard 5 no's and 3 yeses.
You did.
So the motion would fail.
Yeah, Desmond, you're right. Thanks for catching that. I got turned around on that one too.
Okay, so I was going to make the motion for denial of this case. I suppose we can go ahead and vote on that, and if that fails, vote on another motion.
But Mr. Chair, let's if it's suitable to the board, let's wrap up the consistency first. Let's get that since that first motion failed.
All right.
And then we can move back to the zoning
Okay,
case.
that makes sense.
That's suitable to the board.
That's fine. So is there a motion on the consistency?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is Clarence. I move that the planning board find that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? Mr. King, will you please call the roll?
Yep. Let me get a different pen for this one. George Bryan.
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan.
No.
Jason Grubbs.
Yes.
Clarence Lamb.
Yes.
Chris Leak.
No.
Bo McCray.
No.
Brenda Smith.
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
I got 5-3 on that one.
And then do we need to go to the third portion or?
So, Mr. Chair, I think we need to do the zoning case itself next. We need a motion and a second on the zoning case, whether to approve or to deny.
All right.
How much acreage is remind me how much acreage the Cedar Quest is? How much are we asking to give up?
10 acres would be the full site taken out of the bank.
10 acres. This is a really hard case for me, and I am usually one to not wait on a plan. If somebody's ready to perform, I'm usually ready to support them. And that's probably the way I'm going to head out. But I really do. I think this is a super important piece of land. And I sure would like to see some assemblage out there. And I don't know any way to do it. And we can't make a man buy land that's not available. And it may be 50 years before something else comes up where you could assemble that whole tract. So I'm gonna move that the planning board recommend approval of F-1602.
Motion by Mr. Lamb. Is there a second?
A second.
Second by Ms. Smith. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I would like to explain how I'm feeling about this. If we had Winston-Salem Inc. or somebody here talking about some kind of plan that was going to be there, some kind of assembly of all of this,
Yep.
that there was demand. If I was hearing from some developer, even if, others were saying, wait a minute, a business park has to be one place, it can't be 15 places, as with any other business park, then I would feel differently. But what I hear is somebody's ready to move. This land's clearly in our legacy looking toward this. Yes, it doesn't have sewer, but they don't require this. So I'm ready to go with them.
And I'd like to say a couple things too. I agree with Mr. Lamb. This is a very difficult case. And it's just a matter of where you come down in terms of whether you want to support the investment now, which is, I agree, very important, or hold out for long-term investment, which is extremely important for our future. So I kind of come down on the other side in terms of long-term planning, and that's my thinking on this.
I just want to also say I'm in alignment with Melinda here. I really do think that sometimes when we act too quickly because the first door opens, it kind of limits us for really grandiose opportunities coming down the pike. We are one of the most exciting mid-sized cities. We really do need to protect some of this land for some really long-term planning. And though I fully support current economic development, I think this might be a short-sighted avenue for us to pursue.
Thank you. There is a previous motion and second on the floor. Are there any additional comments? All right, Mr. King, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan.
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan.
No.
Jason Grubbs.
Yes.
Clarence Lamb.
Yes.
Chris Leak.
No.
Mo McCray.
No.
Brenda Smith.
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
So it looks like that's a 5-3 for approval. And so the last item for you is action on the CETA itself.
What's the motion? What's the form of the motion that we recommend granting the request for their CETA allocation?
Correct.
Okay, I make that motion.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Lamb, second by Mr. Grubbs. Any further discussion? Mr. King, would you please call the roll?
George Bryan.
Yes.
Melinda Dunnigan.
No.
Jason Grubbs.
Yes.
Clarence Lamb.
Yes.
Chris Leak.
No.
Bo McCray.
No.
Brenda Smith.
Yes.
Jack Steelman.
Yes.
So that looks like a 5-3 to recommend approval of the CETA allocation as well. So I think that completes the actions needed on this item. And I believe that wraps up your zoning agenda for this meeting.
Thank you. So we'll go right into the staff report.
Yep, and we'll be quick. We recognize the time. So first I'll recognize Desmond here for a quick preview of your May public hearing.
All right, Mr. Chairman and board members, we're going to have more fun next month. We have 13 applications. 13 applications, 3 of those are annexation conversions, and 3 more of those are planning board reviews, which you all will approve or deny on the spot. So the others may have hearings, they may be on the consent agenda, but 13 items.
Aaron, you better get some more pens.
Man,
What are these cashews I hear about? Do we have virtual cashews?
We're going to start mailing those to you.
Chris Murphy's in charge of the cashews.
Yeah,
I'm allergic to all nuts. Just remember that.
We're going to have to get an Amazon Prime account to start mailing those to you guys. Just two other quick notes. City Council met on Monday night, and we had a few items on there. We had two zoning cases. One was for the Starbucks at the corner of Peters Creek Parkway and Brewer Road. That item was approved with some additional discussion about Parkland High School students crossing Brewer Road to get to that site. So there were some considerations there and additional condition added to that request, but it was approved. Metropolitan Village, which you may remember was a large mixed-use project east of 52 between 3rd and 5th Streets, about 7.5 acres. That was approved unanimously as well by City Council. And the other item of interest there was the Cottage Court and mixed-use text amendment. That was debated. It was approved 5-3, but since there were only 5 votes, it will have to come back for a second reading. So it's still got something left on it. So 5-3 was the vote on that. And the only other thing I will mention is, as you noted, Tommy Hicks, his tenure with the planning board ended. He has gone through his 8 years. City Council has appointed Walter Farabee to fill his spot. Many of you may know Walter. He used to be on our staff here, and he works at Greater Winston-Salem, Inc. He was appointed by City Council. He is awaiting confirmation by the county commissioners before it becomes official. So just wanted to give you an update on that, and that is all I have. And the only thing I will say is that was a good discussion, I think, and you see some of the struggles with economic development and sort of current versus future. Keep that in mind when we bring Mark Owens in at your April work session, because that's going to be a lot of the discussion. I think that'll be a good kind of precursor to that discussion with Mark when he comes to visit you in April. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you very much. Again, thank everyone for your patience tonight. Councilmember Scipio, Councilmember Larson, thank you for hanging in there with us tonight. Planning Board, thank you for your effort. This was difficult tonight. Anything for the good of the order? If not,
Have our motion to adjourn. Thank you all.
Second.
thank you. Everybody have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Good night.